there's protection. All right. Well, I've known from a really young age that I wanted to be a rancher, and I realized that that's what God was calling me to be as I got older in life. And I grew up on a cow-calf ranch, went to Oklahoma State University, and I really enjoyed the land stewardship and improving land through conservation. The Simron River, it flows through New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma, flows through the ranch. We're in the mid-grass prairie. We have over 200 varieties of forbs and grasses on the ranch, 7 different ecological sites. The ranch has been in my family for 50 years, and I began operating it in 2007. So this story is going to be about what I've accomplished there on that ranch since then. The ranch originally was 10,000 acres when the family got it, and the portion we own is about 4,000 acres. When I got there, there were 4 windmills, 2 pastures, no improvements. There's never been any electricity on the ranch. It's fairly remote. And so when we began to develop it and put in the infrastructure, one of the first things was start with water improvement. And we're really blessed to have good water. It's shallow water. Along the river bottom, it's 7 feet to water, and in the sand hills, it's about 20 feet. And it's really plentiful. One of the projects was drilling was drilling a well on the highest point of the ranch and putting a solar pump in and a storage tank to gravity flow the water different directions down the pipelines to a series of tanks. And where there wasn't enough drop and got too flat out there, we would just put standalone solar pump and a tank and 20-gallon a minute pump so we could water the cattle all grouped together. Up in the sand hills, I removed a windmill and put in a solar pump and pumped it uphill about a half-mile away to a storage tank. And gravity flowed it down to a series of tanks. And during the same time, we fenced the land classes separately from each other. We took the river bottom and separated the sand hills from that. And then we had some uplands with canyons, and we separated those, and then we divided each of those sections into more pastures. So we went from 2 pastures to 9 pastures at that time, and I fenced that with barbed wire. And later on, I'll explain why we went that direction at that time. There's always been a lot of salt cedar on the ranch, and or tamarisk, some people call it, along the river, and a lot of cottonwood trees. And so the problem was a very invasive red cedar started coming in, and the birds would get the seeds and sit in the cottonwood trees. And so we had the eastern red cedar trees growing up underneath cottonwoods, and then of course they'd fly other places. And it was mainly on the river bottoms, not too much in the sand hills, but it hadn't been dealt with for over 20 years, and it was just getting out of control. So something had to be done. So I began cutting those, and I cut about 1,000 acres out of the 1,500 acres in the river bottom. And then after we got that cut, and you can still see the salt cedar there and some of the cottonwood trees, but it was just just full of the eastern red cedar as well. But then the problem was all the little seedlings were coming back up, and it seems like maybe for every one there was 100 more, and they were hard enough to find the first time when they're tall and I could see them. So fire was the only viable answer, and I hadn't burned, and so I needed to learn how to do that and get fire breaks put in. So I joined a prescribed burn association 2 counties over, just to gain some experience, and then of course in return, it's kind of like branding calves, in return you get some help back. And so we did that and got some experience. And then later on, I formed a local prescribed burn association with my neighboring ranchers. And it's finally grown enough now that it's sustainable and we can do our own burns. Here's fire trucks going along. We're just starting to backfire on a burn. So we begin burning in the sand hills, and we're trying to control the sand sage and the sandhill plum bushes. And so we did a burn there, and the difference was just startling. You look across my fence to the other pasture that was, in my opinion, was still well managed, and the difference in the grasses was just unbelievable. Where we had burned at, you can see the regrowth coming back in the plum bushes, and up on the sand hill, you could see all the grasses coming in there, and it would make a real believer out of you. There's some of the sand hills where we stopped and had a field day and had neighbors in, and we're trying to get people to start burning because it wasn't burn culture, and so we had a field day and got some people to start doing that, and then just showed them what the difference was. You can see the sand sage and stuff, coming back in that other picture of the plum bushes, and the difference is, now the sunlight could get in there and get to the ground that was once shaded by that sand sage. Some of that sand sage was big as the cab of a pickup, had a couple of inches of stalk on it, and there wasn't any grass growing underneath that. And once we got that burned up, the sunlight got in and the rainfall came in. Of course, sand sage grew back, but now it was growing upward, vegetative-like, and all the grass was filling in, and it was just wonderful seeing the difference. So after that, we moved over to the river country and started burning down there. And there's so much brush with all the salt cedar and the cottonwoods and the eastern red cedars that we had cut. There was a lot of fuel, and if you like burning, it's pretty impressive. It got a lot of attention. I had a lot of phone calls. The fire chief finally came out and sat on the hill with me. The next day, the wind got about 40 miles an hour, and that thing took off, and neighbors were calling. Everybody thought they was going to get burned out, and I was like, well, it can't really go anywhere because we had a quarter-mile black around it. And I thought, and I was sitting there. I went down there with my little fire truck, and I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, boy, if it jumps this, I thought it'll be in Oklahoma, and we'll never stop it. Finally, the fire chief came out and stood on the hill next to me. He said, I'm having so many phone calls, so I just sit out there. And he goes, that's pretty impressive. And all those hardwoods were catching on fire, but we got it burned up, and we continued to burn. Another picture of how it went through the just all the brush, all the understory there and everything. And then we started doing a phase 2 of our fencing project. We're putting in, thinking there's 9 permanent paddocks that we'd fence, and putting 1 high tensile wire in there to divide those out with 1-inch fiberglass posts. And I kind of wanted to have the permanent pastures around it, so they get out of the little 1-wire fences, and we get dry, and cattle get trained, but the calves won't be, and they'll be out. But they don't get away, and they get down the river in the brush. I mean, if they're out, they're still in the pasture. There's an old cowboy saying, well, they can't get away. There's water on all 4 sides. But I thought, well, I don't really want to go chase them that far, so we put a barbed wire fence around there. And I used those 1-inch fiberglass posts because they were, because we were going to burn, and they're fire resistant, and it worked out pretty good. Here's the thing that, this is why we were doing it, and it was so amazing. Once we put in more paddocks and increased that number of paddocks, the grazing efficiency went up about 10%. Doesn't sound like much, but the real thing is the carrying capacity increased by 40%. Carrying capacity is #1 driver for profitability, and so that was the big deal. So we went to 26 paddocks after that. Um, and then the average stocking rate in my area is about 20 acres per animal unit, and we're around 12 acres normally. The only problem with that is I don't know what normal is. It's been just all over. There's probably a new normal. I just haven't figured it out. But with all the woody species on the ranch, fire is going to stay. It's going to be an important tool. So in my short tenure there since 2007, I've been around the ranch for the last 50 years, but since 2007, we've had we've seen some real challenges. In 2011, I'm sure a lot of you were in the drought too, but it was the worst drought of my lifetime. And during the growing season, we had no usable rain. And I say usable rain because I don't consider 1/10 of an inch when it's 110 degrees usable. And we'd have something like that, and you might even see a little green tint to the grass, but before it could grow, it was gone. The wind was blowing 30, 40 miles an hour every day. And so we survived that summer entirely on our carryover grass that we had from the winter, and by having a very good drought plan that we could follow. And followed the drought plan, and some of the cattle were shipped to other locations, some were sold, and overall the ranch was destocked by 50%. And it stayed that way through 12, and slowly started rebuilding, and took us several years to get rebuilt, but we got through it. And then in 2017, in March of 2017, the largest wildfire in Kansas history, the Starbuck wildfire, burned over 500,000 acres, including our entire ranch. As we were beginning to burn and stuff, I made the comment to our state burn coordinator, who's writing our burn plans. I said, well, we've always had wildfires out here, and I said, you can see some of this land has been burned. I said, one thing about it, the whole ranch will never burn. And he reminded me of that, a year or so later. I thought, I don't remember saying that, but wow, was I wrong? But I guess I never even envisioned that could happen. But we had 5% humidity, 50 to 70 mile an hour winds. At one time we thought the ranch was going to be spared. It looked like it had missed us and went by us, and we had a wind shift out of the north here. It came about 50 miles an hour, and it was headed towards us. I went down in there. I got a hold of my yearling cattle, started moving. And we don't farm anything, and I had a neighbor over there across the creek, and I said I can't really see it from my place, but some years it's wheat, some years it's feed or something. I didn't know what he'd done. Pulled it up on Google Earth, and it's getting dark, and I thought, it's not very green, but it looks a little green. So I thought the only thing I'm going to do is obviously the cattle were going to be, burned up. And so I headed over there, and we got over there. It was no-till and had thatch about that high in it. So I took them clear to the back side of it. And when that head fire hit that, it came across there quite a ways, but it did stop it. And then I went down to the river country where the cows were to look for them. And, I couldn't see them. The fire had already came down the canyons, it came across the river. I didn't see any cows. I figured they'd be trapped. I didn't know where they were, but I knew I needed to get out of there. And so I went back up to the headquarters, and I had a little sprayer up there and got it going, and started back burning around the headquarters, just trying to save it. And we did. I was out there all night, and you're just watching your ranch. You're just watching it burn up in front of you. And I kept refilling that thing and spraying and trying to save a little grass, and nobody came, no help came. There was hundreds of fire trucks that showed up. There was so much fire lines, so much need, houses to be saved, and we're remote and across the river, and I could see lights across the way, and there's probably 50 fire trucks over there trying to make a stand, but all night long, not a one showed up down there. Next day, about noon, finally wind shifted and some more fire came at us from another direction. My land had already burned, but the land going out towards the highway of my brother's hadn't. And fire chief calls and he says, if you're down in there, get the hell out of there. And of course, I got that message like the next day. I'm like, oh yeah, he called me. But I didn't want to leave, and I couldn't have got out anyway. So there's only one way out, and it was blocked. So, but I wasn't trying to leave. We were still trying to save some cattle. And actually, in this picture, that's my brother's cattle. I wasn't calving, but he was, and his cows were running from the fire, and it was about to overtake him, that head fire. And because this next day we're already burned, and I brought his cattle in there and put them in a little trap there by the headquarters. But so, we're all sand out there, and we know we're sand. It's kind of like there's a lot of people you really don't want to see naked, probably me included, and so you know that. But this is a ranch you don't want to see naked. It's sand, and it's pretty ugly when it's bare. You can see down there. You can see the river bottom is starting to green up, but the hills up there, there was nothing on them. It was just a pretty sad situation. We had about 30 miles of fence burned up. 14 miles of it, that right there is a pretty new fence. We had hedge corners, and it burned them off. We had steel posts and stuff. It stayed. So we don't put any wood corners in anymore. It's all pipe. And but we had to completely rebuild a lot of fences. And people came and helped. We had volunteers, and we were fencing, and it was just amazing. My friend sitting out here in the audience, Ed, he calls me up and he says, I'm sending you 2 semi-loads of hay. He didn't say, do you need any? He just said, I'm sending you some hay. Appreciated it too. Cattle didn't have anything to eat. The ash coming off that was just horrible for the cows. So we had some opportunities come out of that. The fire went through that salt cedar and decimated it in ways that with a prescribed fire we could never get it through there because there wasn't much fuel. And so these big old thick trunks had a thick skin on them, and take a lot of chemical to spray them. And I wanted to get rid of the invasive, the eastern red cedar, but I really wasn't even sure I was going to tackle all the salt cedar. But it was little, and it was starting to regrow there. You can see the little regrowth. So it was tender and gave us an opportunity there to spray some of it. Another picture of some of the regrowth of it. You can see the old burned up stuff, and so stuff grows back pretty fast. So we got a helicopter in there, and we sprayed some of it. What we could. It was pretty expensive. We surely couldn't spray it all, but we wanted to see how it worked. And then we also pulled some of it out because it was little, and on our skid steer we just put an attachment, and you just kind of pop it out there. There's a root ball that you can see there. It's not a really very good one, but if you don't get the root ball out, you just cut it off. It just grows right back. If you burn it off, it grows right back. You get the root ball out, and it's done. So we pulled a bunch of that out. That stuff was 100% canopy before the wildfire came and before we did that. I mean, you couldn't ride a horse through it. You could kind of, if you bend over enough, you could get through it or crawl through it. But, there wasn't much grass growing. And the interesting thing to me, it's probably been 50 or 70 years or more that salt cedar had been there, and the native grasses weren't underneath there because they put down a salt chemical, or I don't know what's chemical, but the land's salty and it won't grow. But as soon as they were removed, not to this point, but just the fire and the sun and the light could get in, our native grass seed bank was there and it was coming back. I should have taken a picture of it. We started growing more grass than I ever dreamed of down there because it's our best land. It's sub-irrigated. It's along the river. And I'm just going, wow. And we can run a lot more cattle now. So we're spending some effort and some money getting that taken care, some of that taken care of, and trying to do that. And then, I said I'd cut 1,000 acres of the 1,500 of the eastern red cedar. So now I got just one pasture, about 500 acres of just dead cedar trees. Well, the only thing better about a dead cedar tree than a green one is that they don't drink water, but the cattle still can't go get underneath it to graze. I was riding by it one day, and I was trying to decide if I was going to do that. I got too close to one on my horse, and it just like sliced my hand like a razor blade. And I thought, yep, they got to go. Now, there's nothing going to be sticking their head underneath there to eat that. So right now we're cutting all those and stacking them and piling them, getting those out of there. Some of our primary grasses that we have on the ranch are sand bluestem, indian, little bluestem, switch, buffalo, blue grama, sand love, alkali saccaton, and we're getting some eastern gamma grass back, with our rotational grazing, and we're getting more and more of that each year. I grazed through all the paddocks one time, with our rainfall. I'm just not able to really make it work going through more. I tried for a few years, and I'm a lot happier. We just grazed through all the paddocks one time in the growing season and one time in the dormant season. Then all the regrowth is stockpiled, and that's my winter grazing because the cows graze year round. We don't normally feed hay. I'm not saying we never fed a bale, but we got sand bluestem 8 feet tall, and if snow gets so deep the cows can't reach it, I can't get down there anyway to feed them. So they're pretty much, not going to. Doesn't work out very well to have that as part of my program. We've got some good monarch habitat here with the milkweeds and everything. Having healthy grass is very important to me. The soil health and the healthy roots are a priority, especially on our sandy land. And I want to have full recovery, before we graze, and that's one reason we go through it in that manner. We have a good population of dung beetles, and I try to really protect those by not using the pesticides out there. And we also, we have quick recovery on our grasses, like after the drought and after that wildfire. They came back quickly, and that's because our roots were healthy, and so I'm convinced that how you manage before a disaster will determine how quickly you recover afterwards. You can't hide bad management, but good management will shine like the noonday sun. I had less weeds, less bare soil, quicker growth, less long-term stress, and all because the roots were healthy before the disaster. My goal is to raise maternally focused, moderate framed, easy fleshing cows that are fully adapted to their environment. We keep the input costs down on them, and it's because their maintenance requirements are lower. And the cows, they calve in April and May, and we use composite bulls or used to add the hybrid vigor to them. And then at 10 months, the calves are fence line weaned. We got one advantage. We got the river bottom that has cool season grass in it, and it comes on in March and April, and we can put those cows down there, and even if they've lost a little condition during the winter, from keeping the calves on them, through part of the winter, they can flesh up real good before they start calving. And then the calves are kept, and then they're summered on grass. So, we work on a profit per acre, and we're not working on production per animal. So we're looking at the whole ranch management, and the goal is, one of our goals is to sell the cows at 5 years of age, and while they're at the peak value before they start declining in their price per head. And so to do that, we expose all the heifers to be bred at 14, 15 months to calve as a 2-year-old. The open heifers, then there's some 5-year-old cows that we sold this last year, eating a little DDG there. The open heifers are sent to the feed yard along with the steers. They're fed in an all-natural program. I'm GAP 4 certified, so I can get the most premiums, and the cattle are set where they can go to, we sell them to like the Creekstone normally, and they'll sell them to like Whole Foods, or they'll send them to the European market, or they're set up to go to China. I don't know if they're sending to China yet, but they're they're qualified to go there. That picture there is just of the bred heifers that are on hand. We're in lesser prairie chicken habitat. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife is trying to determine whether they're going to list the prairie chicken or not. I'm not too concerned about it either way. If you're managing right and you're taking care of the habitat out there, you don't have anything to worry about. If you're overgrazing and destroying the habitat, maybe you probably need a little help anyway. I've got a saying that's what's good for the chickens, good for the grass. It doesn't seem to me like it's a real conflict in managing the two together. We have the Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory out of Colorado. They come out each summer and do a bird survey, and the numbers of nesting birds that we have, the score's high each year, and this is just a reflection of good range health. We also have a hunting enterprise. This white-tailed deer, that's not a great trophy there, but I put that picture in because that's my son, and I'm very proud of him, and he thinks it's a great trophy, so we're happy. And we also have quail hunting as well, and we're in the process of trying to do a conservation easement on the property to preserve our land goals, and I don't feel like I'm giving up very much because this property's it's never had any oil and gas development. There's no electricity lines, no public roads, not even close. And it's basically been unchanged for the past 50 to 100 years. So we're going to see if we can get that done. My next major challenge is going to be transitioning the ranch in the next 10 years. And, I knew how to go out there and manage through a drought. I knew how to rebuild infrastructure, and had lifetime experience doing that stuff, but I've never transitioned to ranch, and to be quite honest, I'm kind of scared about it. Like one speaker yesterday asked me how long he's going to work, and he goes, "I'm going to work forever." I know he wants to, and he doesn't want to. I don't want to face having to do this, but I'm going to have to do it, and I don't want to just fall over out there someday and go, well, now I don't have to worry about it. I want to transition it, and I don't have an heir that's going to come back, and I don't have any trouble having kids that will inherit it. I don't have one that's going to, at this time anyway, going to take the ranch and operate it. So we're trying to figure it out. We're going to go to some more meetings and listen to more speakers, and we're trying to learn and be proactive and deal with it like we deal with everything that's difficult. So here the name of our conference is, taking the gamble out of grazing. So I've got a 3-step approach to taking the gamble out of grazing. The first step's using managed grazing. It gives the grass to rest until it has full recovery. And so short graze periods and long recovery periods. And my second step is calving when the forage best meets the cow's nutritional needs. You think that's just pretty common sense, but I don't know when springtime became January, but anyways, it's not at my house. But enough said about that. And the third step, having cattle adapted to their environment helps them fit the conditions that they have to live in. You know, I'm not interested in modifying my environment for them, and they need to live with what we have. What we have is abundance of, you know, most of the year, low quality, warm season grass. And they need to be able to live out there in those conditions. So when I combine these three practices with the management goals and the business aspect to make ranching for profit possible, it certainly keeps me motivated. In closing, there's two more keys for me, and one's that my wife's my true partner. She supports me in, you know, in every way, and encouragement and prayers, and chips are down. I know she's there beside me. And then probably most important of all is that we ask God to direct our paths, and he does. And there's my contact information. Any questions? Yes, sir. We're cutting. We just finished cutting all the skeletons, and next I've got to go out there and get them stacked. And they're going to be brittle. They're going to be a mess, but we're going to stack them up, and then we'll probably let them sit there until we do a prescribed burn and burn them up then. There's people doing that, and I think it works well. I went and looked at some of that. We're just making do with what we have. You know, I have a saw, and I got a grapple, and you know, got nothing but time. No, that's a lie, but yes, sir.
We have a lot of parallels between us and you, but we do have a state line between us. We're not that far apart, but your burn association, we have issues in Colorado where when we need to burn, we're in burn man.
Oh yes.
The sheriff is the head guy in Colorado, county sheriff. Who dictates to you when you can or cannot burn, or do they?
We have to call in. We have a written burn plan, and I give it to the fire chief, and we have to call in to the dispatch, telling them when we're going to burn. And with our state law, I think it says 16 miles an hour. So we have, but in our burn plan, we have a prescription of humidity that we're trying to stay in and when. And you know, there's a little bit of, you know, in agricultural burning, there's a man behind us that you've got a lot of questions. He can answer them better than I can, Ed. But in agricultural burning, I don't think that the county commissioners should have authority over us. I guess being new to burning, I called in my first burn. I called up to dispatch, a little girl answered the phone, and I said, we're going to do a prescribed burn, let know we're getting ready tonight. She goes, oh, permission denied. I said, I didn't call for permission. I called to tell you we're getting ready to light fire. Well, I don't know. I think that caused, yes, sir, Ed will speak about this. And our fire chiefs do not know that. That's a hot topic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As long as it's not a state issue burn ban. If it's a county issue burn ban, we can still have our ag burn.
Yeah, and I'm in Comanche, and Clark doesn't seem to understand that. Someday we're probably going to do battle, because we're probably going to burn when they don't want us to. But no, Ed's right, and that's the way it should be. They just don't all know that. Mm-hmm. Ed told him one time, he said, that's fine, I'm going to send you a bill for every day I can't burn. Am I telling that correct?
So like your fire chief, is that your local
Yes, Jane.